Yeah, so Jonathan, thanks so much for joining us for this founders meeting. I'm super excited to have you on here. I know we spoke previously about how your role has evolved a little bit over the last few years, and specifically your role with the Florida Gators. Before that, you were at Tulane. Can you kind of just take us through your career and kind of how you got to where you're at today?
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to be here, first of all. So I just kind of fell into the role as far as the return to play side of things. I was a strength and conditioning assistant at Tulane. Year one, I kind of just was doing some things with players on the side, touch and go here and there, but it was my first year with that staff who had all was all together previously. So I didn't want to just kind of come in and introduce a lot of new stuff, stepping on any toes or anything like that. So I just kind of, did things here and there with players. And then I'll say year two, year two at Tulane is really when I started kind of to ramp up my intention as far as with our guys and actually kind of having a plan day to day with our guys. And little by little, players just started trying to kind of come with me with little things that they were having issues with, whether it was just a little discomfort or pain or tightness or things like that. And what started with one guy on the table turned into, groups coming in the morning, groups coming in after lifts, groups coming in at the end of the day, writing up programs for players to do work at home. And so I would say that was happening for a lot of year two up to the point where I would say where it became kind of an official thing, where we had one of our starting safeties at Tulane who was coming off of a shoulder surgery. He came to me, and he had been doing his treatment and doing his rehab, but he really was still very limited in everything shoulder wise. I mean, external rotation, adduction, extension. It was basically he had to learn how to have a shoulder again. And so we started off doing some table work. Like I obviously communicated everything with our ATs, and they were cool about me working with them. Started off with some table work, just like some ISO ramping, some HEMAs and PEMAs on the table. That progressed to him doing some pills and rails and more HEMAs and PEMAs on his own for homework. And when I mean very quickly, we as myself, the player, and the medical staff all saw a huge difference once I kind of stepped in a little bit to the point where one of our ATs one day came into our office in the strength staff room and essentially just asked me to formally be a part of that player's treatment plan for the rest of his time. And that was kind of when I realized, like, okay, so this is something that I can actually really start to focus on as far as like what I really want to make my craft in the field. And just kind of took it from there. So did that the rest of the season with Tulane. We had a great year, both on the field and also just health wise. We were blessed to get the job, or our head coach got the job at Florida, so he brought us along with him. And arriving at Florida, we kind of jumped into the same thing how we left at Tulane, where I was very involved with our players on a day-to-day basis, as far as pre-lift, post-lift, individual needs on the table, just really kind of handling a lot of the players' needs as far as just day-to-day return to play things.
Yeah, very cool. Can you since you brought it up, let's kind of jump right into this right away. You are part of the team that moves from Tulane to Florida, but you're still part of the strength and conditioning staff at Florida, correct?
Correct.
And so, can you kind of describe? I know there's one person in particular that you work super closely with. Can you describe your relationship, like who that is, your relationship with them, and then how you fit into the team as a whole? Because you're kind of in this really unique hybrid position. Kind of it's with S&C, but it's kind of a little bit of medical. You've been brought in there as well a little bit. Can you describe like how those relationships work, how the communication works? So for example, let's say you're managing me as an athlete, and I've tweaked my hamstring, for example, and then I get sort of sent to you. What does that look like for me?
So the really cool thing when we got to Florida, one of the only two coaches that were retained on the strength staff, Jesse Ackerman, um, he was actually the return to play director for this previous staff. And so when I came on board with the staff now, we were just truly tag team everything. So he does a lot of table work himself. He does his own he does his own thing with his own modalities with players that they get good results from, and he'll send players to me to do the same thing with my stuff on the table. It's to the point where it's true. Sometimes he'll prefer a guy to come and do stuff with me first, and then he'll say that makes his sessions more efficient for when he's working on guys. And so the way it works typically, I'll handle the pretty much day to day, every day. What are we doing as a team from a player mobility, activation, injury prevention standpoint? Any sort of morning activation like prior to like a high volume or high speed day. That's something that I'll put together and organize and run. And then what Coach Jesse does, he'll do pretty much, like I said, he'll do his table work, but he's also the one who runs our field work and our field progressions for our return to play guys. So a lot of those guys will see the both of us for table work. They'll get prescribed work from me as far as stuff to do on their own. And then as far as like when we're at practice and our injured guys are doing their work, they'll go see him for field progressions.
Okay, so yeah, so this is what I find super interesting is that we previously had a conversation with Adrian Gordado at UCLA football, who's the director of return to play there, and he actually describes that field work as part of his role. So he's kind of cut out a little piece of the field for himself, and he'll kind of do his thing there. But what you're describing is you and Jesse Ackerman have kind of evolved this relationship where you're handing off the field work and he's sort of taking command of that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Jesse, I can't sing his praises high enough. Like his career resume speaks for itself. He's been everywhere from Texas to the head strength coach for the Falcons. So he has a vast amount of knowledge. And then honestly, just for the purpose of this call, he's a huge West Side guy. He's from Ohio. He knew Louis like that. So we speak a lot of the same language. And the reason why it works, honestly, is I think I speak for the both of us when we truly have a mutual respect for each other's work, especially because we do completely different things. It's not like we don't do the same work. So a lot of times in those situations, those scenarios can get a little contentious, or like you feel like it's like, oh, you're seeing him and not me, but it that couldn't be further from our dynamic. Like we truly have a respect, and we see a need for what each other does, and I think that's what makes it work.
Yeah, I mean, I'll kind of maybe just second that a little bit. Where what we hear kind of on our end, I think, is um, exactly kind of what you just described. Where like if you and Jesse in this role are sort of adversarial as opposed to like working kind of as a team, like that relationship can become ugly so quickly. And I mean, you use the word contentious, which I think is perfect for that. Let's jump back a second to when did you actually start adding table work to your repertoire?
So, funny thing for me, my whole path as far as with strength and conditioning is kind of completely backwards. I initially, like out of college, like most people in our field, I got a degree in kines, but I planned on going either the AT or the PT route. So I started working on tables really immediately. I was working on tables honestly sooner than I was really working extensively in a weight room setting. So I got a lot of good years of experience just putting hands on tissue and just getting a feel for tissue, learning how different movements should feel, what I should be looking for, things like that. So I was implementing that before I even got certified as a strength coach. So when I did ultimately commit to the strength coach route and I still had those tools that I had previously, I was able to just kind of implement them because there wasn't anybody else in the weight room that could do that. That was something that was typically they had to leave and go see a trainer. They had to leave and or wait for the day that the physical therapist comes in to get something similar to that. I was able to just bring my table into the weight room like immediately. Now that was something that was I'll say day one bringing it into the weight room at Tulane with like our head strength coach. Like at the end of the day, it's a football strength coach, our head strength coach, special forces, really intense guy, hardcore. He sees a stretch table brought into the weight room. Of course, he's looking like, what the heck's going on? But at the end of the day, what he even saw was when he has guys who either had to leave the lift altogether, or what he hates, just a guy complaining to him about something hurting because he don't want to hear that at all. He just doesn't. So when he's able to see less of that happening and less complaints and things like that. Like I said, that started at Tulane, and it's to the point now we're here in Florida. He makes it a regular announcement to the guys at the end of the lifts that they have to come see me. Like he makes that that's like a part of what their weekly program consists of. He puts it at the bottom of their training cards. You must get in X amount of hours with Coach John each week. So yeah, the table work, it was just something I was able to jump right in with just because that was what I started doing before I even got into S&C really.
So as somebody who is essentially doing conjugate in the clinic on the treatment table that you described using HEMAs, PIMAs, and oscillating isometrics, would you say like it sounds like because you kind of took this inverted route to conjugate in the clinic, let's say, where you were sort of table work first, strength coach second. So by the time you get licensed as with strength and conditioning, I can imagine like the hole that you see must be massive, and you described it as like, hey, instead of waiting for the PT or the AT in a couple days or whenever people are available, like I can just immediately step in and start to act on whatever issue that I see in front of me right now.
Absolutely. And then even with that, I was able to look at a lot of the table work and different, even like the FRC work that I did with guys. Like I was able to look at it more in the realm of strength and conditioning once I got into that field. And so I like immediately I'm kind of looking at it like, why aren't we like truly programming a lot of this extra work and mobility work? And it's historically always been such a like kind of like a mindless extra work thing where it's just like, all right, here's your one extra work card that's posted in the locker room or on the strength coach's office, and it's one card for the whole year for every player. And it's just like if you have any sort of just any sort of knowledge or extensive history working with people from on a table or just understanding bodies and joints, you just know that doesn't make any sense. Like and so I kind of actually like that I learned one before the other because it just made it kind of clicked immediately once I stepped into the weight room more often, where I'm just like, okay, this can be ramped up a lot more. Like this can be this mobility work or whatever you want to call it. This can reflect the sort of same sort of metrics we're trying to look for and get out of strength and conditioning. So yeah, it's been a really cool journey.
You brought up the term mobility. Do you think that like one of the challenges that I kind of see online, let's say, just generally, is that like people will kind of funnel some of this stuff and they'll say exactly that, like this is mobility stuff. When you're working with an athlete and you're implementing HEMAs and PIMAs and oscillating isometrics, how do you get that buy-in? Because I know you and I have spoken previously about this. How are you getting buy-in so quickly from people? How are you kind of reframing that mobility conversation to like different elements of reactive strength that you might see as underutilized or not quite addressed yet?
Mhm. So I would say a couple ways. So the number one way is I'm fortunate enough to have the full buy-in from Coach Witt to where he allows me to like seamlessly move from being on the floor with the whole team to working with the individual guy who needs something. And a lot of the times, the one thing that I'll always start guys doing is I don't pull them away from their rack or pull them from the floor when they have an issue, at least to start. I'll try to introduce some sort of whatever they need, like hemas, PIMAs, whatever I'm trying to introduce to them as far as the stimulus in between their primary movement. So for them, I found that they just look at that as part of their workout now. Like now it's not like extra work because that's for me. The hardest thing I think, like you kind of are alluding to, is they kind of need to break away from the mindset of just like, oh, this is just the extra work. This is like the mobility stretch time or whatever, because then the intent goes away completely. And when the intent goes away, I mean, you're essentially wasting your time because of a lot of the stuff that, at least a lot of stuff that we do, it requires a lot of focus, a lot of effort, depending on what you're aiming for. And when you don't have that, or when they're not bought in, it's just a waste of time. So I try to introduce as much as I can in the middle of the lift. The music is still blaring, the guys are still hyped, they're still hitting their weight. It's just, hey, in between, hey, you don't get to just rest in between now. You got to come over here hit this with me. And that's what they do. And so we haven't had really much of a problem because we were able to get buy-in with a lot of our team leaders pretty immediately. And in football, you get the leaders to buy in. Everybody else is gonna follow if nothing else, just for out of curiosity and just wanting to be as good as they are. And so that was a big deal. That was a big deal for us for so having stuff for them available in the middle of the lift, and then also just you just have to make yourself available. Like no time is too small. So I tell guys like I'm in the building as early as possible. I'm available pre-lift, pre-team run, right after the lift, right after the team run, during the lift, after the lift. There's no excuse for a player to say like they couldn't get with me. So, and I think with them, when they see that you're willing to put that type of time in, like they see that you actually care, you're doing stuff that is completely just for them. Like, I mean, so many just individual write-ups and plans and weekly schedules for guys. So you just got to put the work in sometimes. Like sometimes it's just the guys have to see you putting in an effort, and they'll respect it. And once they see that, they'll buy in, and you'll get, I think you'll get a lot of compliance out of that.
Yeah, I think what you just said is phenomenal, Jonathan. In that, I think that being staying in the cage is probably played to your advantage, where you've separated again. You've kind of they come over and you go, or and they're thinking, hey, this is some mobility work, and you're like, no,
Mhm.
this is just continuation of training. And so I think you probably framed that really well by staying in the gym setting. Let's change directions a little bit for a second. You just said no amount of time is too small, right? We can if I can do a little bit of if I can make myself available to these athletes as much as possible, then um, then I'm going to do that. How do you, in the setting that you're in, how do you obtain, how do you obtain, and what is the strategy to obtain as much of a complete point A assessment as possible?
Well, so I would say specifically with us being year one with this team, like just getting here in January, you truly have to hit the ground running as far as doing, in my opinion, in doing as much testing as you can. We're fortunate to be at a school like Florida where budget isn't really an issue as far as all sorts of uh, s- testing, strength testing equipment, GPS data. Like we have a lot of data that we have access to, and I think that the tendency sometimes when you get someplace new, especially where we have like a very who like Coach Witt is very based in the fundamentals. He just wants to just really get good at the fundamentals, and then we'll follow with the rest later. The tendency sometimes in those situations can be, hey, let's just let's kind of just worry about getting our numbers, our fundamentals down first, and then let's get to our strength test and all that down the road. But you just don't have that time now. Like the turnover for players is too short. You only have these guys for a year or two now. So you have to test early and you have to test often. And you have to test, like I tell people, you have to test in different conditions. Like you need to test on a Monday fresh, see what the guys look like after coming off, after not doing anything. You need to test after a few days. You want to test after some fatigue. Like you want to see different scenarios so you can have as much data as you can. And then as far as other than non-objective data or objective data like that, you also want to get like you want to talk to the people who had these players before you. And so now, at least in the college setting, more than ever, like more than ever, you have to have a relationship and a network of coaches that are on your level because we're essentially just trading players. Like that's all we're doing. SEC players are trading with other SEC schools, Big Ten or other Big Ten schools. We're all just flipping players. And so, as strength coaches, you need to have that network established across your field so you can reach out with no problem and get a good read on a guy, both from his performance, but also just like, okay, but how does he move? Like, where is he limited? Where does he tend to have low back pain from? Like, that's all data that you can help to establish your point A, kind of walking in the door, at least those first few weeks, other than just like I said just looking at them in the weight room. That's only going to tell you so much. And then other than that, you got to get them on the table. Like you got to get you got to get your guys in on the table just because you're only going to be able to see and I think you're only able to see really like a lot of the symptoms when you're watching a guy's deficiencies as far as movement. Like you can see a guy moving, you can see, okay, he has this wrong, or even a player reporting to you his pain. that's still just a symptom, and we still have to figure out, well, what's the actual limitation, or what's the biggest limitation that's going on right now. So we just try to hit the ground running.
So can you be a little bit more specific with regards to like what you specifically are measuring as part of your physical assessment point A with these athletes?
So I do a joint analysis that is, so I don't have FRA. I use what's called MAT, Greg Roscoff's MAT. But it still uses a joint by joint analysis where we're checking everything after we look at each joint segment and find limitations there. We look at, all right, well, what muscle actions are limited from that joint. We test every single joint act or every single muscle action from that joint, and pretty much try to look for what's the biggest, what we call it, the biggest elephant in the room, or the biggest limitation, and then work our way down from there. So for me, I'm not really, I'll do a total body assessment for any player that comes on the table, but we're almost always going to just work most of the time in a session. We're just going to work on that biggest limiting factor, because in my experience, a lot of the times, even if I can see four or five different things that he might need to work on, a lot of the times that I've hit the biggest limiting factor, some of those other issues either went away or the severity of them decreased. So that's typically how it works when they come into the door, at least from the first couple of weeks.
Let's move to a bit of return to play stuff. How would you say that your how would you say your practice has changed in the last year or two?
Definitely the organization of it, for sure. That's the biggest change for sure, and a lot of that honestly came from you guys in the art and science of programming. Like that really organized, I feel like, a lot of different resources that I had, both from you guys and some not from you guys, to where I was able to kind of just look at it to where, okay, let me look at joint function. Let me look at absolute strength. Let me look at reactive strength. Let me look at speed strength. Like all of those components have a place. And where I feel like in years past, I feel like I would get caught up in only trying to address one thing. Or like I would just always be like all in on like one modality at a time, it feels like after I got FRC, all I wanted to do was pails and rails. Like that was it. Like that's all I was doing with people. That's all I felt like you needed to do to a degree, obviously. But and I feel like I just went through different phases like that. After art and science of programming, it really kind of helped me to view the benefits of kind of just, it's like, no, we need to address everything. Because like I said, I went through the phases of just doing correctives all the way to just like, hey, just get stronger. Like just get stronger, and that's probably gonna fix your issue. And it's like, well, everybody's right. Like I could take a little bit from each kind of modality or thought process, and kind of use that to, like you guys put it, like make a full program out of it, just like we program our guys in the weight room. It can be progressed like blocks. Like I do all of our stuff is progressed in 3 week blocks, just like our weight room cards are. So just truly looking at um, truly looking at it just like we train traditional strength is probably the biggest difference, where I don't look at it as two different schools of thought anymore. Like, no, they're all under the same umbrella of performance.